Happy Sunday, collective. Hope everyone had a good weekend. I am doing a little bit of plant creativity today. And as you can see, some collection of jade cuttings. And they are really, really nice cuttings. I had this really nice kind of shallow dish from, I don't know, something like a while ago. And it's just been sitting on my potting bench in the back like a year with just like dirt and nothing in it. And I'm just like, already has like a whole drainage hole and everything. And I'm like, this is just a shame to not be doing something with this. So if you are already subscribed and you're just here wondering what's going on with these cuttings, thank you for tuning in. Welcome back. If you are new, thanks for coming to my little channel to talk about the plants and the planets and food and feelings and everything in between. And if you don't mind, I'd greatly appreciate it if you went to the channel page and hit subscribe, just so more people can find themselves stumbling upon this little channel in the algorithm. But I'm here today. I didn't have a video plan. I just naturally, sitting there thinking like, well, I want to do something with these cuttings, and I was just gonna do it and mind my own business off camera. But then I was like, I started thinking about like the universe, of course. And then I started thinking about like the universe being a hologram, of course. And I was like, wait a minute, I think I could connect this to jade cutting. So are you intrigued? Well, then you need to stick around and listen to how. So um, of course, as I am always going to do, I'm like, why in the world am I thinking about the universe being a hologram right now? What does this have to do with jade cutting? So open my little sky app to see what the planets are doing, and lo and behold, there goes Uranus, the weird revolutionary, spins on its side, revolutionary, doesn't go in the direction that all of you go, but I'm still part of you all. That planet, co-ruler of Aquarius. So Uranus just stationed direct yesterday, Saturday, the 27th, I think that would have been. And the reason that's pretty significant is it had been retrograde for like a few months, like since the end of August of 2023. And the way I like to describe a planet in terms of the energies, right? A planet that has been retrograde for a while, especially like a weirdo like Uranus or like something that is considered like a collective energy planet. Um, Imagine like a big ship, right? And right before it changes direction, it's just kind of like slowing down, and it's almost like you feel the full weight of the thing as it slows down in preparation of it changing course. Now, this is really just like, because of course, when you really look at the technicality, no planet ever moves backwards. It's just what retrograde describes, like, because it's all from our perspective here on Earth and our relative orbits and like speeds and distances. Like if you looked at the solar system in motion, which I highly recommend at any point to understand more um, the way that astrology works, especially retrograde, because you're not never going to see anything like orbiting backwards. It's just it looks like something is moving backwards in relation to our orbit, because not only are we all orbiting like each planet in its own funky thing, but then we're all like, traversing around the sun, and like we've got, some of them have like more circular paths, some of them have more like elliptical paths. And so sometimes, like when everything, all these like pieces, almost like this very intricate like clock and all these like gears, it might appear from our perspective here on Earth that something that generally looks like kind of further away and like on a regular orbit, as we like approach it and like based on our orbit and like the relative distance of the sun, it might start to look like we're like gaining traction on it and it's like slowing down or like going the other way. So um everything in astrology is based on the perspective from here on Earth. with the understanding that we're all moving around the sun. And so when I describe like retrograde and all that, it really relates to like the energies. All of this is about like the energies that we feel, like the things that are there that we can't see that are there. Um, and so I like to describe that as like what you would feel, like the almost feeling the full weight of something as it slows down, and right like kind of at it stops, and then it's like kind of gets that momentum going back the other way. That's kind of how I like to explain the energies of like the days surrounding both like pre and after any planet that has been retrograde for a while and then stations direct. So like Uranus, like the weirdo planet, basically in the fixed Earth sign of Taurus, um, is trining. So that just means harmonious. There's a harmonious flow of energy existing between the planets involved in a trine. So that's all you need to know for purposes of now. The reason that I'm like, why do I want to talk about the universe being a hologram and pot up these jade cuttings? It's because the weirdo planet, having just stationed direct in the fixed Earth sign of Taurus, is trining both Mars and Mercury in Capricorn, the cardinal Earth sign. And remember, Mars, planet of action, like putting something into action. Sometimes aggression, and then being right next to conjunct Mercury, like your thinking, your like cerebral processes, like rationalizing, analyzing. um Even if you're just like getting a feel for all these things, you can start to see how just the interplay of like aggression and thoughts, like being right next door in the cardinal Earth sign of Capricorn ruled by Saturn, sort of putting structures around these energies, like sometimes more productively than others, but trining a harmonious exchange of energy with like the weirdo Uranus that co-rules Aquarius, like and every Aquarius that you know, with someone with prominent Aquarius placements or many, that's going to be the friend that's like, do you guys want to talk about aliens? Like, who here wants to talk about space? Anyone? That's me. I mean, honestly, in my group, like I've probably outed myself already. So it would stand to reason that the co-ruler Uranus, having that buildup of energy, and now it's like, all right, here we go. We're like stationing direct now in Taurus. How me like feeling the need to let my freak flag fly in that way, that Aquarian energy, while getting my hands on these like earthly delights, like Taurus, like sort of like putting it into the 3D world, but still wanting to engage in my mind in a way that like sort of marries it all together. So that's the energy that we're working with now. So there's never been a better time for you to tune into this channel than right now, and to consider these like sort of anything like esoteric or just astrology in general. So here I am. And I needed to do something with these cuttings because I've had them for a week, and the way I came about them, it was so exciting. If you saw my last video, my Ode to Platonic Love, and talking about Venus and Capricorn, I had mentioned that I visited a great group of friends who I love so much and I had such a great time with, and definitely helped like give some momentum to me personally, and kind of bringing me back to the me that's always been there, but sometimes when that you becomes like fragmented over time, whether it be time and distance and like life circumstances and hardship, or just being, sometimes like in relationships, romantic or friendships, where maybe you forgot the value of being around people um, that help you to be fully who you are all the time. Like sometimes if you find yourself in the wrong relationships, um, you can feel that being kind of chipped away over time, and then before you know it, you wonder like how much like there's such a small piece left. It feels like there's such a small piece of the core that like is the me, the all encompassing me, that the people from uh where it all began at your earlier parts of like life and friendships and meaningful connections, how they remember you. Sometimes it can be I think sometimes one of the reasons that you um maybe avoid like reaching back out to people from your past is because you you wonder like how much of yourself you're able to retain. And so that's where I want to get into. It just all kind of clicked for me when I thought about this gathering with those friends, and how no matter how small the piece that you feel might be left that someone wasn't able to chip away at over time, how that one little piece contains all the information of the whole, like much like a hologram works. So, anyways, we'll get to that. Um, but when I came back, and I had told you that I had friends, like one of them who came to like help me with my dogs. Well, his wife, who I'm also really good friends with, like her mother was visiting, her family was visiting. They were doing a belated Christmas get together. Her mom's a really talented gardener. I believe she's a master gardener. So she knows the stuff. And anytime, lots of times she's gone to visit my friend, she'll have brought like cuttings or like something. Um, and so this, she did this time, and she had a bunch of extra jade cuttings. So I got a text the next day, after my gathering with my old school friends from high school. High school, she was like, "Oh, I think my mom left some surprises on your doorstep." And I was just like, "What?" And I was so excited because I found this box of just like these jade cuttings, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is so exciting!" Like they're so, getting cuttings from anyone is exciting, but getting cuttings from someone who really knows their stuff with plants is even better, because you're like, oh, these are like really good jade cuttings. These are like cuttings from a healthy plant, of course, are always going to be preferable to like pieces that you maybe found somewhere from a plant that may or may not have been in like good condition. I would take either, but the point is, I have like a really healthy collection of jade cuttings right now, and so I've had them for a week, and so I'm like, I need to go ahead and like get them in some soil. And so any of you who've ever worked with jade, or like, just any succulent plant, of course, one of the most exciting things about them is, of course, you can have cuttings, unlike a lot of cuttings from other plants that would have long been expired, just sitting out for a week. Um, Not these kinds of cuttings. Like um, it's funny because you don't have to have anything in water, like some other cuttings. Um, they're pretty hardy, and of course it helps to have like, a longer stem um, from the larger plant. But as a lot of you already know too, is sometimes you can just have this one little fragment of a succulent or like a jade plant, and you can stick this in soil, and albeit, the smaller the fragment, like something like this that you have, the longer it's going to take for the whole to become, like, for it to look a lot to take the form that you would recognize as a jade plant, of course, right? But still, in all of the information of the jade plant is stored in this thing somehow. Even though this is like, oh, is this enough to create like a whole plant? It's a little easier to visualize it with this, but you could still get there from this. Now, I'm lucky enough to have these bigger cuttings, but any of the little like leaves that fall off, of course, I'm gonna set to the side and like, set some other pots up and like get those going. And so, of course, I can't help but think of this very obvious analogy that's like being laid out here of, anyone that's not familiar. When I say a hologram, there's a lot of like really people that have a background in physics, which I do not. I just have like a deep fascination with this in like a different career route. And like if I'd been more self-aware at a very young age, I probably would have chose like theoretical physicist as the route that I went. But I still have always been fascinated with it. Like just there was a show that used to come on. I don't know if it's still available, but it was called Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman. I just loved it. I've seen every single episode. Well, it was my comfort show. I'm sure I could find it if I really like went on some service, one of the 80 that exists, and like found it, maybe bought the series. But it was like, I guess like that show, if you want to understand sort of my inspirational pieces to like what I do on this channel, it's like if you took Through the Wormhole with Morgan Freeman and then you like combined it with Mr. Rogers, and then you combined a little bit of it with reading Rainbow, and then combined a little bit of it with Martha Stewart in some weird way. Uh, that's kind of where I found myself feeling like most comfortable, somewhere in like the Venn diagram center of all those things. And so like Morgan Freeman's Through the Wormhole did a really good job of taking like really seemingly inaccessible subject matter to like just the layperson, and like doing an excellent job of like the anecdotal, but like mixed with just the right clips from experts, like proper experts, that could give you like the meat of a subject while like putting it in motion, whether it be through like, really clever illustrations of just like mundane activities to illustrate some principle of physics or of the universe or whatever. All of the above, really. So I really like shows that do that. It's so effective. And, I just think of like the world of possibility of like if you had like a proper production team and like editors and all that, like all the things I could think of in my head to like illustrate some of these things I talk about. So for purposes of this little channel, we just kind of scale it down to, you know, Uranus is aspecting in a harmonious way Mars and Mercury. Let's talk about how that relates specifically to my desire to talk about the universe being a hologram, and the whole being encoded on just a part is a perfect tie-in to like these jade cuttings. And not to be short on the extending the metaphor, where I started in this little spiel of when you go through a period of time and you feel like sort of disconnected from like that essence of who you are, that sort of like you have that sense of continuity, but you feel almost like you wonder like how much of that is left, and like is how much is recoverable, if it just feels like such a small piece left for whatever reason. And then you put yourself in the right environment, with the right mindset, and you're reminded of like how the whole is all the information of the whole is present in no matter how small the fragment, and it's been like that the whole time. And so, not that that's like how a physicist would probably choose to explain like the holographic universe theory, but for purposes of like you watching, I think it's a really effective way to illustrate, because the real like crux of it is like the theory is a really nice way of reconciling this sort of age old scientific problem of reconciling Einstein's theory of relativity, so like large body physics, with small physics. Quantum mechanics is what that's called. So there's just, in the world as we see it, we've got like the observable matter, like big body science, and then like little things under a microscope science. And those are generally known as like the theory of relativity, like large particle physics, large body physics, whatever. And then this other branch over here called quantum mechanics, which describes what things do when what we call matter, when you look at it under a microscope, and how that's sort of like the big elephant in the room of the subject matter of like understanding what we call physical matter in this world. How Why would it be that like these things, when observed with our eyes, seem to operate under one set of laws, and then when you take, like, say you snatch that object and like you take a piece of it and then you look at it under a microscope, it's like, what in the hell is going on here? It seems to toss the laws that you thought applied in the big body sense out the window when you look at it up close under a microscope, which is insane. Actually, that's an insane reality. That's not something I'm making up. That's just like, go to any scientist in the world of like physics and like chemistry and all that, and they'll all be like, well, yeah, that's just a thing. And so the holographic universe theory is like kind of one of these like eureka things that came about really as a way of like providing this really interesting reconciliation point that would marry these two seemingly unrelated laws of matter. And so uh, I think that the technical way to describe it would be, it sounds even weirder when I try to get like in the proper scientific way of describing it. It's that everything that feels 3D to us here is actually just all of reality is really just information. It's just information encoded on like really a two-dimensional plane. And it's just such an intricate, like complex code that like our experience of it and how it registers to us, like as large bodies moving around, feels 3D, which to me, that just sounds more insane than like my like Jade plant explanation. So, um, but look it up sometime. It's really interesting. There are actually some pretty good treatments online, including on YouTube, of people that do a better job of explaining it. If you really want the scientific like wording of it in sort of that Morgan Freeman through the wormhole sort of way, but I like to try to break it down into like well, it's like sort of the way a compact disc works, right? It's you've got a piece of music and then like it's just this all this information that sounds so rich and complex, and it's really just somehow like encoded on this 2D surface. But when it comes to like reality and the idea of the universe being a hologram, um, thinking of things in bytes and like megabytes or whatever, and just information, a really good illustration that I think I saw illustrated on maybe it was through the wormhole once upon a time, was if you imagine that you're seeing your reflection, right? Imagine you see your reflection. You're looking into like a pond, like a puddle or something. You see your reflection, and there you are. And so you're like skipping rocks. So of course it like ripples and kind of breaks up your image and like many different ones, but each one like seems to contain um, the whole picture. It's weird. It's almost like you get a repeat of yourself, right? When you create those ripples. Now imagine like bam, like a flash freeze of that puddle. And so that like those multiple images of you are like locked in. Everything just freezes. And then you take like a rock or something or like a sledgehammer and you just like smash that puddle into a bunch of different fragments, all kinds of different pieces, no rhyme or reason, just a bunch of different pieces. Holographic universe theory would basically essentially work out to be to where I could pick up any one of those fragments, no matter how whatever size the shard, and the information of the whole would be encoded on that one little fragment. The whole would be recoverable as long as I could snatch one little fragment, and like the whole thing could be recovered. Just sit with that for a second. I mean, I don't know. I think it's really fascinating. I love sitting in places like that because when you start to like look at things like working with plants, it's like it sounds crazy even if you have no background. Say you've never watched a single episode of any of the shows that I'm talking about. I mean, there are multiple shows out there over the years that have tried to make these really seemingly complex principles accessible to like the layperson's mind, sort of like Bill Nye used to do back in the day. Shout out to like everyone in my generation that learned a lot from Bill Nye. Um, you work with plants and like these principles don't seem so crazy actually anymore. You start to it's easy to take for granted, like, oh yeah, well, that's just a cutting, and if you like stick it in, this whole other thing will grow. But like if you're just like sort of looking at the world as like a newbie, sort of like as a with that whole beginner's mind, like sort of like a child would, you might stop and be like, wait, hold on a minute, explain that. And you would want like somebody to elaborate. And because the person living in this world, if you've always worked with plants, and even if you just don't think about like large and small particle physics, you might just be like shrugging, yeah, that's just like a rule of working with plants. But when you really stop and think about it, it is amazing. It's like, well, I don't have an explanation beyond that. That's just a thing, and everybody knows it. If you work with plants, you just know that. I mean, same with like seeds. It's like you have a seed, and then you either soak it or you score it, and then like you have the germination period, and then like the sprouting, and then like the fruiting and the flowering, and like, the whole stage, and then like the plant uh, sort of, dying back for the season, and then like part of that whole process, like what's left behind, like, you know, a seed head leaves behind like enough to start the whole thing over, even if all the whole plant is like torn to smithereens from the weather and like drying out and freezing and like snowstorm, whatever. As long as you could recover just like a couple seeds from the seed head, no matter what the rest of the plant looks like, you could start the whole process all over again. Like one little piece will contain the information of the whole. And I think that that's a really fascinating thing when you really sit with it, because it really, I gotta say, a lot of these principles were like kind of like made, it's like almost all these things that always live in my head came together a lot more harmoniously by engaging on a therapeutic horticulture education path, because you really start to like hear the sort of evolution. You know, you go into evolutionary psychology, and you see how like ever since the beginning of time, there's like, you know, people that have dedicated their lives to studying just like archaeological evidence, like burial sites and all that, and anthropologists like studying essentially like, yes, here's this physical evidence, and then like pulling those threads about what does that suggest about humans relationship with these plants, like what does this burial site suggest about the state of mind of ancestors, um, what was the purpose of burying these Neanderthals with seed pods, you know, and like there's, you know, you might say it's, well, I want to make sure that I have sustenance in the afterlife, you know, that's like a theory, and you want to make sure it's almost like there are many different ways you could look at sort of believing in like something beyond death, and like how, well, you got to eat, so here's your seed pods for the afterlife, like that's one way of looking at it. But also if you just look at it from like a point of like coping and like seeing the almost like sacredness, I guess, of like the coexistence of like our evolutionary process along with these like plant materials, for example, and seeing it all as interrelated, like the course of a human life is like inextricably intertwined with like the course of like a seed, and like all of those stages of germination, like sprouting and fruiting and flowering and like dying back, all of that, and then starting the whole thing over again. um it's very much like a Jungian, like Carl Jung's theory about how, you know, his whole, the reason I talk about archetypes, his whole theory on archetypes is really kind of intriguing, because his whole belief in why he started to study astrology and like tried to do like grander experiments involving astrology and tarot and just like esoteric studies about like why these archetypal images seem to ring true sort of universally, no matter what a person's life experience is. And it suggests that there's this like, you know, in our DNA, it's like we've evolved alongside these living things like the plant world and everything over like the course of 3 million years, um, and encoded within us all, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, are all these archetypal images, like all of these like life cycles and everything that's already been lived out in in human history. And it's just like almost these like latent pieces of information that sometimes when you see like a great piece of art or like a great a movie that stands the test of time, or like read a great story like in literature, or see an image like on a tarot card, how there's something that is triggered, like unlocked, and it's like you're not learning something, you're remembering it. um and you either, when you hear me say this, you either know exactly what I'm talking about, or you're like, this sounds kind of weird, but like keep going. But think of like a video game. Think about how video games, you have this like Abby, a starter Abby, and it's like this really basic storyline. You're just going along, you're choosing your outfits in the menu, and it's like just this simple shit. And then you progress long enough, and then you have some encounter, and then it's like, oh, new level unlocked, and then like a whole world opens up. It's almost kind of like that, to where all the information's already there. You just have to like you just keep moving forward. You keep interacting with the environment, and like an interaction that you just kind of stumble upon or something that you see sort of unlocks something that has been there the whole time. So I thought that was a really interesting tie-in about not just these jade cuttings that I was very excited to get, and I'm really happy to get my hands on tonight. But then just the whole like thinking back to an experience of feeling fragmented for a while, not even realizing I felt fragmented until like, you know, the whole tower moment comes, and then you realize like how far away from yourself you feel like you had gotten over time, and how there's a lot of insecurity that comes with that, like wondering how much of you as you identify with still exists, and then the small moments of reassurance sometimes that are helped along by being put in a familiar environment, being you know, in the presence of like a friendly, familiar person, that wherever you left off, you know, that whole of you that you felt was so like gone, you were like, no, it's been here the whole time. Like it doesn't just go away. Like no matter how small the fragment is, sometimes you can just like sort of re-energize it, like sort of power it up, and then it becomes larger and larger, almost like reboots. And then the reboot is like almost feels larger than the original before it was sort of slowly chipped away at. And that's what I talk about in the last video, about the value of coming back to yourself and doing it in whatever way that you can. It doesn't, I mean, people, you know, there's a value in that. Just talking about like, of course, the collective consciousness and like, especially the collective energies at play now, how you're going to find a lot of richness in human interaction, like human to human interaction, in a way that arguably other things can't give you. But not everyone has people left in their hometown. Like it depends where you're from, and not everyone has people left in their hometown that were necessarily great connections. So finding something to come back to yourself with, even if it's just a hobby, right? Like sometimes even wherever you are, you know, that saying, wherever you go, there you are. It's like, that's why you can't outrun yourself, but that's also a good thing, right? Like if you can't make it back to where you used to be, or the people you know, used to be with that made you feel whole, sometimes an activity like a hobby that you've put down after so long because of this or that, or it's not practical to do this anymore or whatever, sometimes it's just an activity that brings you back there. And you can do that wherever you are. So going back to the whole being encoded in each little part, each little fragment, no matter how small, I wanted to talk about the universe being a hologram, as one does when Uranus goes direct and is forming a trine to Mars and Mercury, currently in Capricorn. And Capricorn being Saturn ruled, I was able to actually put a little bit of structure around these seemingly out there thoughts. So use that Capricornian energy to create some boundaries that don't limit your expansiveness, but like put you like, let's talk about the universe being a hologram, like aliens and stuff. Well, I'm all for it, but like use this energy of Capricorn to like and Saturn. What would Saturn say? They'd be like, well, that's great and all, so what? And you know, use the constraints of Saturn, the discipline of Saturn, to give a little bit of structure to this and create something around it, to, you know, give some like some utility to the so what. So I want to do a check in with that, and again give a shout out to my friend's mom for these jade cuttings because honestly, it was one of those things where I was like, these are so nice. Like, I'm not just going to plop them in a plastic pot. And instead of doing that thing where I overthink to the point of ruining the cause, couldn't let that happen. Like when the cuttings are nice enough, you're like, well, I got to get right to this. So I immediately thought of this sad, neglected little honeycomb sort of designed planter. And just for anyone that's not like familiar with working with plants, I don't recommend crowding cuttings like as a general rule. But for this, it's different. Like for a jade plant, you know, you can actually put a cluster and like maybe hopefully create like one larger thing from them. So you just got to keep, ideally it would be a little bit further along in the season to where I could like maybe stick them outside for a little bit more. But luckily the weather, at least where I am, is so like finicky to where even though it's cold right now, it'll probably be a matter of like 72 hours at the most to where I'll have like a full day or two of fine outdoor weather with enough humidity to give these things like make them happy before I got to bring them back in. But just keep the soil lightly moist. You just don't want it to dry out, but you don't want to, of course, have these things waterlogged, obviously. And I mean, in case it's not obvious, anything that can sit out, like any cuttings that can sit out like this, unattended for a week or more, are not going to respond well to being waterlogged, like in any shape or form, no matter how developed the plant is. So, just like succulents, uh, and a lot of plants like this, a common way to kill them is to overlove them, and that usually means overwatering. So, uh, this might be one of those things that benefits from like a tray or like a plate with some pebbles and like a little bit of water underneath it, so that you don't have to sort of guess like from the surface level of the soil, and maybe you could just encourage like root growth by keeping the moisture at the bottom, like encouraging the roots to like go downwards as opposed to finding their way as they develop upwards, looking for moisture, which is what will happen if it's used to getting like surface soil level moisture. But if you continually keep the water source like at the bottom, as the root system develops, it's going to like just know to keep reaching downward. So it's like a general rule for pretty much any plant, actually. If you get your plants used to from the get-go not relying on the surface, especially when it's at like that sort of stage of root development where you don't want the roots to like be trained in the wrong way, start letting it know from the get-go, like go reach downwards for your water, don't start reaching upwards. So we have now my lovely little potting, my first potting. Of course, I still have plenty of cuttings to go, so I'm gonna have to scout out some more shallow containers and see how many of these guys I can get going. And I guess I'll let you guys know as time passes how it's doing. I'm going to try to show, one thing I try to remember is to show the failures. Not that this is going to be a failure, I don't even want to put that out there, but show the plant fails along with the plant triumphs, because I do want it to be a channel that shows that, hey, it's accessible to everyone, and that means that for every like successful plant you see on like a blog or Instagram page or whatever, that required a lot of failures that probably weren't so pretty to post on the page. So, but in this case, I don't think we're gonna have a problem, because look at how lovely this one's already looking. So anyways, I hope everyone has a good start to the week. I hope I don't keep you awake at night, laying in bed, thinking about the universe as a hologram. And if I do, well then maybe your mind wanted to go there anyways. So you're welcome. I'll check in again with the next transits. I think I don't know. It's probably something to talk about before then, but next moon cycle is going to be a new moon in Aquarius. February 9th, but we'll check in before then. Anyways, take care of yourselves in the meantime.